Welcome everyone. Welcome to Sirar's first webinar. And I would like first to welcome our guest here from Qualys, Giuseppe Brizio, CISO for EMEA.
Thank you, Abdulaziz. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here with us today.
My pleasure.
So this is our first webinar, and today we'll talk about vulnerability management, detection and response, VMDR. We'll take you through the full journey, explaining this new model and how it could be useful for organizations. So today we'll speak first about sirar in general and sirar and Qualys partnership. And then we'll take you through the cybersecurity asset management, or CSAM, and then we'll take you to vulnerability management and detection and response, the VMDR. After that, we'll go to the patch management, and then we can move to questions and answers and a discussion at the end. So first, what is sirar and why sirar? So sirar by STC is a new subsidiary under STC group, and sirar is in the market now to provide end-to-end cybersecurity services. Sirar has a vision to be the trust platform for the data economy. And that means that sirar is tapping into the cybersecurity field, where today we have a digital economy, and cybersecurity is an important block in that economy. Sirar is aiming to be the leader cybersecurity for the managed security services and professional services, not only in the kingdom, but also in the region. Sirar is aiming also to be the top-tier destination for the professional and talents in the region. Sirar has a vision also to be the trusted partner for the government and also the private sector as well in the kingdom and in the region. Sirar is going to be the forefront of cybersecurity and will be the leader company in the region, inshallah. So let's speak a little bit more about what services sirar can provide for the customers throughout the cybersecurity spectrum. So in sirar, we believe that we are going to be providing the best quality of service. So we have the customer satisfaction in front of our eyes, focused to be delivering the cybersecurity services, and we are committed to provide 100% solutions, not only for some sector, but we are targeting the full spectrum and full sectors in the domain. So we have an access to more than 70% of traffic in the kingdom, backed by STC access to this traffic, and we have more visibility, and we can provide more context for our services. In sirar, we strive to provide 100% customer satisfaction within our engagements. We also have deep understanding for customers and the customer needs through the engagements for these cybersecurity services. So when it comes to the sectors that we provide the services, we start from the IT and telecom, to the energy resources and the oil industry, to the healthcare and government sectors, also as well as the financial services and manufacturing, and also to the CMEs as well, and even the aerospace and defense. So in sirar, we do provide the cybersecurity services throughout the whole life cycle, from cyber security advisory to professional services and managed security services and operations as well. So we help our customers when they need to define their cybersecurity programs by helping them to build their strategic objectives, to define their governance and assurance program. We do also provide infrastructure protection, from network security to anti-DDoS, to email security, to web security, etc. We do also provide application security assessments, so we can provide pen testing as well, and we can help customers understand the weakness in their applications and help them to know the next steps to strengthen their application security. When it comes to the data privacy protection, we do provide solutions to help our customers to prevent data leaks and to make sure that they maintain the local governance and controls when it comes to the data controls. Also in sirar, we do provide digital identity, and when it comes to digital signature, we provide solutions for that, and we have a well-known solution called Sign for this purpose. In sirar, we define full cyber security and cyber defense solutions. So we manage SOCs for the customers, and we have our own managed SOCs for customer, and even we do provide managed SOC for private customers if they want to have the SOCs on their side. All these services help our customers maintain their cybersecurity and be sure that they are protected against the cyber threats out there. So if we deep dive into these services, when it comes to network security and application security, we provide anti-DDoS and next generation firewall. We manage the web security solutions, and we even have custom services to manage any security solutions for our customers. From the cloud side, we provide email security and cloud security, as well as some custom solutions that we have on the cloud that doesn't need to have anything on the customer side. For risk management and assessment, and that is the core block for today's webinar, we do provide vulnerability management and vulnerability assessment with partnership with Qualys. And we do provide pen testing as well, code review, gap assessment, and we also provide awareness campaigns to help customers make sure that their employees are aware about the cybersecurity threats. When it comes to governance and compliance, we do provide architecture review, and we provide assessment and review for their strategy development for their cybersecurity program. In the digital trust side, we provide science services, as we mentioned earlier, as well as the digital stamp. For the Managed Security Operations Center, we provide the managed SOC and threat intelligence as well, and TFIR. So that means that in sirar, we do provide end-to-end security solutions, from the consultation to designing and building, and to the operation and managed services. In sirar, we have an army of cybersecurity professionals carrying more than 300 cybersecurity professional certificates. And as you can see, selected of the top providers and top, let's say, non-vendor providers in the world. We have also as well partnership with more than 75 security vendors in the world. This because we make sure, and we need to make sure that we provide the best services when it comes to providing cybersecurity services. That for sure helped us to be authorized third-party auditor for Aramco, and that wouldn't be an easy or a given to any company. So for today's webinar, we would like to set the scene before we start diving into the VMDR and the other topics. While registration, we have provided a set of questions, and we received the answers, thankfully, from your side. Giuseppe, can you take us through the questions and tell us what interesting parts you've seen in those answers?
Sure, definitely do. Thank you, Abdulaziz. Let's go briefly through the questions you kindly answer at the registration time. First question is a bit tricky, actually. There was about what's the purpose of brakes in a Formula One car. The intuitive answer is slow down. Actually, and this is from a former F1 driver, actually said, good brakes allows a Formula One car to go faster because you can brake at a later point in time in safer conditions. So ultimately, the Formula One car will make a better lap time. And why am I saying this is because sometimes the perception, the intuitive answer from a business perspective, the cybersecurity puts constraints, put obstacles, and then slows down business. Is actually the opposite. It's like the brakes in a Formula One car. It allows the business to go farther in a more safer way. So you take it this is as a story that you can share with your business. And thank you for the ones who have answered. And as I said, the intuitive was slowed down, but it's actually going faster. That's the analogy, which is very powerful. And by the way, for the ones who do not know, actually, there must be a Formula One Grand Prix coming soon in Saudi, actually in Jeddah, in a brand new circuit. So stay tuned. Formula One will come to Saudi. The second question is about security budget. Just to understand, we are living in times where the attack surface is getting bigger with new technologies, with more interconnectivity in the broader spectrums of assets out there. And the budget is actually, as you can see here, at best staying stable. So with an attack surface that gets bigger, clearly the MINs need to cope with this additional complexity that is coming along. So there is a notion of doing more with less, so taking more advantage of the resources that are available. Because just in some circumstances, the budget is getting higher. And also, if you look at some Gartner's projections, budget is at best stable. Now here, we're going to talk about today cybersecurity asset management, and we ask about how would you rate the accuracy of our assets inventory? As you can see, there's a significant portion which is below 70%. It's roughly 40% plus of the respondents are below 70%. Just bear in mind that actually for a cyber criminal or for hackers, just one occasion is needed to compromise, to breach, to have a fraudulent attack. So just bear in mind that visibility, we'll talk about that in a short while. The question number 4 was about more specifically vulnerability management. And then what is essential is the time to remediate. So basically hardening the systems, the IT environment to be more strong against the attacks and reduce even the attack surface. So the smaller is the time to remediate. So the quicker you can remediate vulnerabilities, the better it's going to be from a cybersecurity perspective, and more difficult will be for cyber attacker to penetrate. Question number 5 is about patch management, which is about remediating vulnerabilities. We'll see in a moment. We are living in times with a huge volume of vulnerabilities, and they keep increasing, and we need to identify and discriminate the ones that have to be patched and remediated first. And automation, due to the volume that we're dealing with, is going to be essential. So that's basically, as you can see here, most of you, 80%, are requiring from medium to high the need for automation, and this is where we come into play.
Thank you, Giuseppe. This takes us to the next part of our webinar. We'll start by introducing and telling you the story of how sirar and Qualys partnered together. And we'll start mainly by taking a look and zooming out to the number of vulnerabilities throughout the years. So this is starting from 2001 until 2020. And as we can see here, the increasing number of the vulnerabilities is rapidly changing and getting higher and higher. And not only the total number of vulnerabilities, but also the high or critical vulnerabilities. And if we look at the last 4 years here, it's very interesting that the last 4 years are all record-breaking. So the numbers of vulnerabilities since 2017 until now are numbers that were never reached before. And actually, for 2021, we're probably going to hit the record again once the year is over, as we have reached to 14,000 by October. And one more interesting fact is that by October as well, the statistics say that we have more 0 days this year than 2020. So it will be very interesting numbers once the year is over. And this explains the challenge for the organizations where they deal with large number of vulnerabilities that definitely cannot be patched and solved using the traditional methods. Automation has to be there. If you look at 18,000 vulnerabilities per year, you're going to have to need an army to tackle all of them. And actually, we have taken some sample of the top critical vulnerabilities as we collected last month from our solution here in STC. Giuseppe, what could you take out of those top vulnerabilities?
Yes, thank you, Abdulaziz. This gives you a flavor, actually, some insight about the Qualys' competitive advantage in identifying the critical exploitable vulnerabilities. You need just to keep in mind the volumes that Abdulaziz just shared. Just a small percentage of those vulnerabilities are really exploitable. And those are the ones that requires attention, in higher priority attention to be remediated. You can see here just a few examples where you have the highly critical exploitable vulnerabilities, and then the related exploits and threats, and actually the assets are impacted. So really, you will see in a moment during the vulnerability management detection and response overview how this comes into play. This is a clear competitive advantage where Qualys is a differentiators in the market when it comes to identify and highlight the critical exploitable vulnerabilities. As a proof of that, just recently at the Black Hat USA, Qualys won 2 awards that you can see in there, and you can probably have a look in more detail. There are some hyperlinks. Real quick, the first one is about an unprivileged user that can, under certain conditions, using the sudo utility, can gain privileged root rights, and this is clearly can be very, very harmful, knowing that this pseudo functionality is basically in every Linux or Unix-based operating system. The second one, also very, very important, is again the ability for an unprivileged user to run again as privileged root user, and even as run unauthenticated code, which could be extremely harmful on a system. And this is based on a certain circumstances on the what is called the EXIM mail server, which is usually available in Unix-like operating systems. And just to give you a flavor, there are probably more than 4 million actually EXIM mail system exposed on the internet. So it gives you a feeling about how broad this can be.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Moving forward, if we look at the spending in the kingdom for the 2020, actually, based on the fact that Saudi Arabia is the largest ICT market in the Middle East, and by looking at the numbers of spending when it comes to cybersecurity, it's really interesting to see that the percentage is increasing for the managed services. Rather than spending more on the hardware or security software. So customers are more relying into managed services because not only it is more efficient, but also it costs less for those customers to benefit from these security solutions. So having this in one hand, in the other hand, having the local regulations, whether from SAMA or the NCA or CITC, all of these regulations are forcing and mandating the customers to have an adequate vulnerability management, vulnerability assessment solutions, and to be also local within the kingdom. So for that, STC, represented by sirar by STC, had partnership with Qualys to provide a local solution for the customers within the kingdom. So this will help the customers to have their cloud when it comes to the Qualys solution in the kingdom. This solution is actually multi-tenant, end-to-end encrypted, providing each customer with their own tenant from the solution. Giuseppe, what can you tell us more about this solution that we have built here in Saudi?
Yes, I can briefly give an overview about the architecture. And as you can see in there is the PCP as a private cloud platform, which is hosted in the Saudi Telecom data center, which is fully compliant with the data residency legislations or regulations, being SAMA or NCA. The PCP is accessible via the internet, so this can be accessed, and the infrastructure from a customer perspective doesn't really require any particular, let's say, interventions or any particular change in the configuration of the firewall, for instance, but the customer can access the PCP, and as you mentioned, the instance is specific to the customer. The data is encrypted. As you can see in there, you can log in to the platform. The data is fully encrypted end-to-end when it's in motion or at rest. And the encryption key is customer specific. As you can see in there, passive sensors can be deployed into your environment, and the virtual scanner or cloud agents into the endpoints. And those components, which are very, very light, they collect data points, metadata, technical data that gets sent to the platform, to the private cloud platform, where the data gets analyzed, correlated to understand where the weaknesses are in terms of vulnerabilities, in terms of misconfiguration, and that data gets displayed in what we used to call the one pane of glass. So a very and highly understandable and user-friendly dashboard where you can pinpoint exactly where your issues are, where your priorities are in terms of remediation, and you can act upon it. So the two key fundamental pillars that I'd like to draw your attention to as part of the cloud platform, one is about visibility. We're going to talk about this extensively. The Qualys solution allows you to have a full end-to-end visibility on your IT environment. And as we all know, cybersecurity cannot be ensured if there is no visibility, or there's not enough visibility. So components that are either not visible or not managed, not known, cannot be secured. So this is very important. A reminder, the question number, I think was number 3 that we asked at the very beginning. It's very important that you have not just a good enough visibility, you need to have a full 100% visibility. Not just from time to time, as we used to say, but all the time in a continuous manner, in what we call the basically real-time visibility or 2 seconds visibility. That's the prerequisite to really have an effective and efficient cybersecurity program. Secondly is prevention and remediation, which is all about the vulnerability management cycle, all the way from detection through prioritization to remediation. So we'll discuss this in more detail in a moment.
So this brings us to the first module that we'll talk about here, the cybersecurity asset management. And as Giuseppe mentioned, visibility onto the assets is very important. And we never stopped informing and emphasizing the importance of the asset inventory when it comes to protection. And actually, the well-known saying that you cannot protect what you don't know. So if you don't know your assets, for sure you will not be able to protect those assets. And in sirar, throughout some of our engagements, and when we had some incident when we tapped into support our customers, we always found a common factor that there is always a missing part when it comes to the visibility. So it's a real issue for organizations out there in the real world, and unfortunately it's still a challenge, whereas it's really basic and really a very essential block. But the actual fact is that there is still a gap, and still organizations need to take and make sure that their asset inventory is up to date. So, Giuseppe, starting by a very adequate and very accurate asset inventory, how that can help the organizations to be fully protected?
Absolutely. Thank you, Abdulaziz. As we keep saying, the visibility and consequently the asset management is the foundation for any cybersecurity program. There is no real cybersecurity without an exhaustive, comprehensive, and complete visibility. And again, not a visibility from time to time, but a visibility in real time and a continuous visibility. So it's any point in time. With the cybersecurity asset management, with this application, we announced it back in June and launched it beginning of August. We basically pushing this further by having this prerequisite, as you can see here, to build a comprehensive inventory. This is for cybersecurity, allows to identify each and every asset you might have, being software or hardware, in your IT environment. Secondly, this allows for the more, let's say, complex organization who do have CMDB in their environments, IT primarily, so the information technology teams. The cybersecurity asset management allows to synchronize with the configuration management database, meaning we can retrieve data which is business context, who is the owner of the assets, where is the owner located, what kind of, is it production, is it a financial, let's say, assets for a financial institution, so very high in terms of criticality. And conversely, it can also push cybersecurity data to the CMDB when it comes to vulnerabilities, for instance, and making sure that a ticket is raised if there is ITSM, so service management in there. So there is a native integration. And the two sides of the same coin, being cybersecurity and IT, can really interact in a very effective and efficient manner. Thirdly, it's not just visibility, it's not just knowing or seeing and knowing what wasn't seen or wasn't known before. It's also understanding. And with cybersecurity, we can determine actually if there is unauthorized software on an asset that need to be removed because it's basically not allowed. If there are some what we call blind spot, there may be some assets that are not being scanned for too long, or maybe even worse, if there are some unmanaged assets who are exposed to the internet, is there some software which is required that is missing, and again is another cybersecurity issue in there. Since some business highly regulated, they need to having certain versions of the software to be run. So in that case, again, you can verify. Very importantly is the end of life and the end of support. I mean, you may have heard when there's a software which is end of life, somebody says this is beginning of life for the hackers, because in that case there are no longer patches, especially when there's end of service or end of support. And this is where you need to decide: is it go to the next version, or you have basically an exposure in terms of the risk exposure from a cybersecurity. Very importantly is what we call the outside in view. So getting an understanding of what is visible out there, what the hackers actually can see out there, what is exposed to the internet. We have an integration with a solution called Shodan, or basically sometimes even called Shodan like the Google for the hackers, because they can see what is there available, accessible. And so all this can then get into a system of alerts and reporting, and then also a response can be made by removing software, for instance. We'll see that in a moment. This is a use case, securing databases, where you can clearly discover and do an inventory and categorize databases, and also defining their criticalities, how business relevant they are, because it's clearly different to have a database in a testing environment and a database in a production environment, obviously, and the degree of prioritization will be radically different. You can track and manage unauthorized databases based on your internal software policies and security policies. Extremely important at the life cycle for end of life, end of support. This is extremely critical for the reasons we mentioned before. When there is no longer patches, it's becoming more and more vulnerable or more and more subject to attacks. And then, of course, the alert on those risks you can see here on the dashboard on the right-hand side. You can immediately see there are 62 critical situations or critical databases, 75 high, 60 medium, and 4 of them unmanaged. So those are gives a flavor of what this can be, what can be found, and what the degree of urgency that you need to apply to secure those assets. Here gives you again, it's a very busy slide. I won't dive into the details, but I'd like you to concentrate on the center being the repository where all the information about either hardware or software, end of life, end of support is contained. Left-hand side, we have several different sources that feed this repository. And right-hand side, we have a set of processes that keeps this content up to date. I'd like you to concentrate on the bottom part of the slide where you see some key numbers that keep growing. Probably by the end of this webinar, those numbers will no longer be, let's say, accurate. They will be increased. We have nearly 1,700 publishers and over 65,000 software releases in there. So, and we have more than 100 hardware manufacturers, 45,000 models plus and growing. This is to really making sure that we detect each and every circumstance, each and every situations of end of life, of end of support, and we can display it to you. So the visualization, again, this gives you a feeling, of course, so when we'll have the opportunity to do demos with you, proof of concept, they will be even more meaningful. But you see the dashboard is highly intuitive, highly user-friendly, is dynamic and customizable. So you can immediately see at your fingertips actually what is wrong and what you need to act upon. The remediation part, one thing is knowing, seeing, understanding, and so what? I mean, you need to have the ability to act upon it. That's the remediation part. When you detect that there is a version which is no longer supported, and maybe you still need it, then you can update to the supported version. So you can trigger a job that will do the upgrade. Or if there's an unauthorized software, then you have the opportunity to uninstall the software. Again, to secure, to strengthen the IT environment hardening, basically, to make it stronger and less vulnerable.
Thank you, Giuseppe. This takes us to the great module or the great solution that Qualys is providing now, the vulnerability management detection and response. So with this solution, actually, Qualys now is no longer a simple or legacy scanner solution, but now Qualys has a one single agent, one single solution. So it can provide you with asset inventory and vulnerability management and detection and response as well. So with this actually, Qualys is taking now the game to the next level. Giuseppe, what VMDR could provide to the customers from both cases, customers that already have existing Qualys subscriptions, or the customer that didn't have Qualys in the beginning?
Yeah, clearly the VMDR engineers the life cycle of the vulnerability management into a single application, starting with asset management. So bringing all the visibility that we keep reiterating. So it utilizes some of the technology which is available in the specific application that we talked about a few minutes ago. So it's in there as a first step. Secondly, allows to detect the vulnerabilities that we were mentioning before, the highly exploitable vulnerabilities, and even more importantly, it can calculate with threat intelligence, several different sources that allows to understand how harmful a vulnerability or how exploitable a vulnerability can be. In addition, in terms of prioritization, the VMDR also applied the business criticality of the assets in question. As we mentioned before, a asset in production is clearly highly more critical than a asset in a test environment. And this allows those three components, vulnerability, threat intel, and business criticality, allows to really to prioritize, and even more importantly, having what we call a risk-based approach to cybersecurity. So you can see this, the cycle here. So left-hand side, assets inventory, as we mentioned, vulnerability and configuration assessment, threat, risk, and prioritization. And last but not least, remember, seeing, knowing, understanding is fine. Prioritizing is fine, but then you need to act upon it. You need to respond. You need to remediate in this case. And that's the patch management side of things. Where in the VMDR, you can have an immediate link. We'll see this again in more detail between the vulnerabilities and the patches. There is an automated mapping. So this is an all-in-one solution that allows to recap, allows to discover, assess, prioritize, and remediate critical vulnerabilities with a truly risk-based approach in mind. This is a brief, just a highlight on what are the qualifiers in the VMDR. You can see this assets management or global assets inventory allows to auto tag, to categorize the different kind of assets. And this is based on dynamic rules-based tagging. So it really allows to categorize in a very effective way. There is a continuous vulnerability assessment. As I said, it's not just from time to time, especially when you have cloud agents out there deployed. You can have continuous flow of telemetry to the platform. And the threat prioritization, absolutely key when you start to analyze and correlate and immediately determine what are the vulnerabilities which require to be remediated first. And of course, the built-in remediation, as I mentioned, which is about the mapping between vulnerabilities and patches. The single pane of glass, we are very proud about this because it's highly usable, highly understandable, and highly friendly. You can, a blink of an eye, you can immediately understand with color coding, with key figures, key indicators, where the issues are and what you need to address first. So the risk-based prioritization, just to give you a flavor, as I say, we'll have opportunity in future to probably have demos and proof of concept. But you can see here in the middle of the screen, the real-time threat indicators where privilege escalations, for instance, or unauthenticated exploitation, for instance. So, or if you see underneath active threats like malware, active attacks, and so on, you can basically couple the threat intelligence with the vulnerability and sort the vulnerabilities or highlight the vulnerabilities which have a active threat and active exploit, and of course prioritize those in terms of remediation. So the patch management, as we said, seeing, knowing and understanding is not enough. We need to remediate. Remember what we said, one of the question number 4 in the preliminary question was about time to remediation. We need to ensure that that is the shortest possible, because the more vulnerability is there, the higher is the likelihood that a cyber attacker could take advantage of it. So patch management is really basically you close the loop by remediating. And here in the VMDR, you can patch OS, patch third parties, and this is based on the vulnerabilities that were identified. We'll see again in a moment the different approaches that we can have in terms of patch management. In the VMDR, you apply patch management to the vulnerabilities that have been identified and then prioritized based on threat intel and business criticality. Very important to mention, but we'll also fully discuss. When you have the agent deployed, you can clearly apply patches to, with the nowadays with the, hopefully the pandemic is to an extent behind our shoulders, but we all being confronted with hybrid workforces being either remote or mobile. With the patch management, you can deploy those users who are out there, not necessarily in office premises.
So now, Giuseppe, when it comes to the effective patch management, it is very interesting that this solution can help the customers to prioritize the patching for the most critical vulnerabilities first, and then go to the lower criticality when it comes to the vulnerabilities. So by closing the cycle now, having patch management, you don't need to rely on multiple solutions. You can have one solution, one unified solution, whereas you can know your assets, you can prioritize them, detect them, and even get alerted when you have certain vulnerability, and then you can patch the vulnerabilities for all your assets. So Giuseppe, please tell us about the workflow for the patch management here.
Absolutely. Let me give you a quick overview on the patch management module. Just a brief recap. We have seen the cybersecurity asset management as a module, as an application. The VMDR, where you have in there embedded into the vulnerability management a life cycle, you have the visibility and the patch management. And there's a third component. We also have patch management as a standalone module that can either operate in two ways fundamentally. One is the proactive patch management, where basically every patch that comes, you can deploy it. Everybody is familiar with the Microsoft Patch Tuesday, but we also know, I don't know if you're familiar with the statistic, that just 33% in average of the vulnerabilities you have in your environment gets patched by the Microsoft Patch Tuesday. The 66% remaining is basically patched by third parties. So you need to really having a comprehensive approach in terms of patch management. This means that ideally you could, deploy every patch that could possibly arrive, and you're safe. But that's the theory. In practice, you cannot apply systematically and potentially disrupt the level of service of an asset. So there is two ways. One is the proactive, as just mentioned. The other one is the reactive, which is basically what we've been seeing in the VMDR. When you initially detect the vulnerabilities, you prioritize, you map with a patch to be deployed, and consequently you remediate. So the patch management workflow and then consequently the patch automation. So you can have a workflow as we've seen before. You have all those steps where you can clearly apply and creating jobs to then remediate vulnerabilities, highly prioritized vulnerabilities. Then in the patch automation here, you can making sure we're still in the proactive patch management. You can ensure that whenever a patch is becoming available, you can applying it to the related product. So you need to define which product requires this automation, and you can use the patch management application from Qualys to apply this automated job. You might remember we had the questions in the beginning, and the need of automation due to the volume of vulnerabilities and consequently the volume of patches becoming very relevant. This is very clear that working from home or remote workforces is extremely relevant because the solution can apply patches to assets that are not necessarily on-premise. They can be remote out there as long as there is interconnectivity and there is agent installed. You can deploy patches without utilizing VPN or similar connections. So when we now move, as I mentioned before, the automation when it comes to the vulnerability identification, you can clearly assign to the IT, who are usually the ones in charge of applying the patches. You can provide, you being from a cybersecurity professional standpoint, you can provide the list of patches to be applied to the highly, let's say, highly exploitable and high priority vulnerabilities. This basically gives the same solutions to the both teams on cybersecurity, who identify the risks and the vulnerabilities required to be patched, and then the IT team, who are in charge of service level for those assets, and are the ones in charge of finding the maintenance windows to apply the patches. So it's basically, just to reiterate this, with this patch management model is one solution shared by the two teams. So there is no cybersecurity solutions, IT solutions, and the two they do not talk to each other. It's the same reference, and they share the same inventory, the same reference data. And it's extremely simplified the interaction between the two teams, and also IT is extremely simplified because they already have the patches that need to be deployed, and not go and search for the patches to be deployed to remediate some vulnerabilities. It's already provided by the solution. The single agent is what everything you have seen. There's just one single agent. I think you can see it in here. Basically, when we say one platform, one agent, one view, we really mean it. All the solution, all the modules that we've been talking about, they just refer to one agent. When the agent is deployed in the on the endpoint, you don't need to deploy it again. So you can it can be utilized for the several different modules available in the Qualys solution. And last but not least is what we call, just announced it very recently, and we keep innovating, as we can see. We really have a lot, and it's basically the zero touch patch, where you can you can define basically rules where, in this case, for instance, in this example, we say that when there is a vulnerability that could be exploited by a ransomware, in that case, you need to run the patch straight away. And you can see here, this correlation can be made between vulnerability and the real-time threat indicator, which comes as a threat intelligence that we collect. So basically, basically we can have this rule-based automation, depending clearly on the kind of rules you think are more relevant.
Thank you very much, Giuseppe. This takes us to the end of our webinar, where we will go through questions from the audience, as well as we will be posting a survey link. So could you please provide your answers for the survey once provided? But I have received several questions in the chat here. So the first question is about offering the same services for ICS industry and OT. From sirar perspective, yes, we do provide services for the ICS industry and operating technology as well. But from Qualys perspective, is there anything specially provided for those sectors, Giuseppe?
Yeah, thank you for the questions. Very good questions, by the way. As we know, as we keep describing and actually demonstrating, the Qualys solutions is really across the board. It is about IT security, but it's also about OT security, and we all know how quick the convergence between those two worlds is coming. So information technology and operational technology. We have a wide set of applications, 20 plus as we speak, and one of those is called ICS, which stands for Industrial Control Security, which is exactly about connected objects, and more specifically objects in the industrial environment. And this is to start to cover all sort of standards, in being Siemens, being Schneider, being Rockwell, and the list is pretty long. So the answer is definitely yes, our solution aim to cover the operational technology as well.
Great. I received another question, Giuseppe. Does Qualys provide a GRC module similar to Archer?
My previous role, I was used to utilize Archer, but we do not have, as we speak, a solutions like Archer for GRC, but we can definitely interconnect and exchange data with those platforms, because we're getting more and more, I will say, in contact with, and clearly with risk management professionals and the GRC professionals. Of course, those are becoming also counterparts. We all know cyber risk is a business risk, and we have discussion. Probably we'll come back on these questions with more detail, but we're not aiming to clearly having a tool like ours, but we have the opportunity to work together.
Okay. I also received a bunch of questions here, but due to the time limitation, I think I'll take the last three. The first question, how is the asset criticality taken into account for prioritization?
Great question as well. To go straight to the point, in the cybersecurity asset management, for instance, we have a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest level of business criticality for an asset. This can be defined by the cybersecurity team. At the same time, for companies who have the CMDB, you will remember, configuration management database, or the inventory in the IT side, usually some of those, like for instance, the well-known ServiceNow, they usually also have business criticality elements in there. And our ability is to take the highest score in between the twos and making sure that the business criticality is factored into the prioritization process to resolve, remediate vulnerabilities.
Great. The second question here, how does the vulnerabilities prioritization take place with the threat intelligence?
Yeah, I think as we briefly mentioned in the example before, there are threat intelligence coming in. We have several different sources actually, and we have what are known as real-time threat indicators. You can really pinpoint, for instance, the vulnerabilities that are wormable or that are linked to ransomware. And in that case, you can immediately prioritize, the vulnerability remediation based on the highest, let's say, or more likely threats that have been recently communicated. So that's the way we do it. And of course, we associate to it also the business criticality of the assets, as I mentioned.
The third question here is, how does Qualys provide visibility, like for port, software, version, end of life, end of support, etc.?
Yeah, I particularly like this one because we keep saying it. Visibility is really paramount, is really the foundations. We have a wide set of sensors, being the passive scanner, as we mentioned before, but also the network scanners, virtual scanners, the agents. So a wide variety of sensors that allows to really have the finger on the pulse, as we used to say. So whatever happens in the IT environment should become visible. Understandable, and also you can act upon it. So the real differentiator here from a quality perspective in terms of visibility is the wide variety of sensors we have for any kind of circumstance in being IT, but also OT, and understanding the assets you have out there. So you remember the percentage we see in the beginning? We aim to bring you to 100% accuracy.
Great. Thank you very much, Giuseppe. Unfortunately, we come to the end of our webinar, and for those who sent more questions, they are kind of not into the topic, but I'll make sure to have the team to answer you on those questions. So thank you very much, everyone. I'd like to inform you that the session is recorded and it will be posted in our channels. We will definitely see you in future webinars in the near future. We'll announce that as well. Thank you, Giuseppe, for your time, and thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you, Abdulaziz. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.